bit of news that is relevant on this is the fact that we paid cash. The reason that we had to give them cash is precisely because we are so strict in maintaining sanctions, and we do not have a banking relationship with Iran, that we couldn't send them a check. And we could not wire the money.
Well, that was the president at the Pentagon talking about the $400 million payment in foreign currency, hard cash, to Iran that was flown in. Talking about that, answering questions about it. We now learned that it was tied, according to the administration, to the release of those hostages, not putting that cash in there until they were released to see that payment. But now we've learned that 2 days after the $400 million in cash was sent, the U.S. wired 13 payments of $100 million each to Iran. We'll start there with our panel. Let's bring them in. Charles Hurt, political columnist for The Washington Times. A.B. Stoddard, associate editor at Real Clear Politics, and syndicated columnist Charles Krauthammer. Charles.
Well, the question is, can they not stop lying about this? The president says that we had to send the $400 million in cash because we don't have a banking relationship and we can't write a check. 2 days later, they wire the money or they send a check through the banking system. And he said that we couldn't do it because of sanctions. Well, the sanctions were still in place 2 days later. This is one lie after another, and it's an administration attempting to cover its tracks, not because anything illegal happened here, although that's possible, but because it is hugely embarrassing. And it just, I mean, Iran has been taking advantage of this, knowing that this administration can be walked over, humiliated, be forced to abandon all its red lines. It, for example, can launch missiles, we say, and do nothing with impunity. And now, as you reported, harassing our ships. Our ships could blow them out of the water with a blink of an eye, but of course, we're not going to do that. But there's a psychological warfare happening here, and Iran wants to show the region that it's in charge with its Russian allies, with Hezbollah, with Syria on the ground, with its 100,000 militia in Iraq, and it doesn't have to pay any attention to the United States. And we have a president who goes along with it in every detail.
Here's State Department today about these $13 $100 million wire payments in the White House.
The staggering of the payments such that each would be just under $100 million, that was kind of odd, was it not?
I can't speak to that, James. I really can't.
But you're not denying that that was the case?
I just don't have enough knowledge that I can actually adequately answer your question.
It's not odd. It's my understanding that this is essentially the way that these funds are administered out of that account.
The way that these funds are administered out of that account, the president said we couldn't wire them the money. Now, it's not odd that they paid $99,999,000 in 13 separate payments that they wired. Now, we don't know, AB, whether it was wired to a third party and then wired to Iran, but they managed to get it there.
Right, and apparently it is legal. It comes from a pot of money in the Treasury Department that is supposed to settle litigation with payments out of a judgment fund, which is an interesting name, where Congress just permanently funds this pot, and he doesn't have to go through and get any kind of approval for these payments. He didn't have to tip anybody off at the time.
Let's just make it clear that this goes back to the 70s when Iran gave the U.S. money for a military deal. It was frozen, and now the president and the administration is saying that we got off easy because we would have had to pay them more and we got off for less. However, the administration didn't tell Congress anything about the payments, either the cash or the wires.
So they paid the Iranians back for the amount, plus this is the interest over all those years. A lot of money. And no, they did it without notifying anyone or consulting. Look, the bottom line is this. President Obama, and we learned from Jay Solomon of the Wall Street Journal's reporting out this week with a new book that President Obama was warned by the Iranians they'd pull out of the talks over the nuclear deal when he threatened a red line against president of Assad of Syria for use of chemical weapons. He backed down from that to keep the talks going. And the big picture is he's hung his legacy on this Iran nuclear deal. He doesn't care how people are criticizing it now. He believes that years from now, it will make him look good in the history books. And you can see through what he did with these payments, in addition to backing off the red line, just how much it meant to him and how far he was willing to go to make it work.
In the meantime, Charlie, you have these Iranian ships, fast boats, intercepting a U.S. Navy vessel and near the Strait of Hormuz, and there you see them. Dangerous. We're told that by the U.S. Navy that they came within 300 yards of this warship, and it's a continued provocation that we've seen from Iran on a number of fronts.
Yeah, as Charles said, this is psychological warfare at this point. Iran is thumbing its nose at the United States because of all of these decisions that we're talking about right here. My favorite part of this, the thing about dropping it down to 99,999,000. I mean, literally, that is something that drug dealers do. That's what people who are laundering money do in order to to avoid being found out that they're withdrawing these huge pots of money. But going back to the thing that AB said. It's become common practice that the administration uses this judgment fund in this way, but it is still a real question about whether it's constitutional or not, because Congress has to vote, as you said, Congress has to vote on these things, and the Constitution is very explicit that no money shall come out of the Treasury that is not voted on by Congress, and Congress definitely didn't vote on this.
We should be fair, they held back 13 cents.
For leverage.
And I think it's because that was sort of 1 week when they had a 99-cent special on ransom. It's rare, but it happened. The other reason is, you've got to look at it and ask yourself, why would they do this? It must be because it allowed them to get under the limit of a reporting requirement. Of course, this is an attempt at concealment. Of course, this is an attempt to make sure that no one knows. And then when it dribbles out, they have the chutzpah to say, well, there's no news here.
Is there any political payment for this? Is there any political payment for the administration, for Hillary Clinton in any way, shape, or form, for how the administration has done this and pulled this off?
I don't think it's going to affect her. She was not in office when this happened. You could say that she began the negotiations during her term, but this was way down the road. This isn't on her plate. This is on the president's plate. And as Charlie said, he did everything, including not lifting a finger during the Iranian Revolution of 2009 in order to get this deal. History will remember this, and it will be the worst mark on his legacy of foreign policy.
Quickly, political payment?
I disagree. I think if Donald Trump was a better presidential candidate, he would try to make her comment, even though she's avoiding media interviews, which I know she's doing, but try to really force the debate about whether or not our intel on ISIS was cooked, whether or not she'll continue in the same way as this administration on a number of issues, including paying ransom for hostages. She just hasn't had to answer these questions.
Charlie?
Donald Trump should be able to make this into an issue by focusing on, this is the Obama administration's foreign policy chickens coming home to roost. His failure to deal with this forcefully and responsibly is somehow tied to the terrorist attacks we see around the world.